Order. We come now to the 10-minute rule motion. Mr. Chris Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to regulate the provision of telecommunications advice lines by all government departments so that call charges to citizens are restricted and, in the case of the most vulnerable, eliminated. The bill I propose today will ask government departments to conduct an assessment for each local authority area of the provision of public computer equipment capable of use by, for example, DWP claimants, and to publish the results. Where that assessment demonstrates that the total number of units of public computer equipment is less than 1 in 20 claimants, all Secretaries of State must make provision for a dedicated telephone number which can be accessed at a cost of zero, and in the case of a public telephone, without having to use coins or cards. I also propose that telephone lines where departments are unable to take a call within a reasonable period, for example 5 minutes, the caller should be given a regular updated estimate of the likely waiting time and that immediate callback facilities be offered. This, I believe, Mr. Speaker, is an essential courtesy. As MPs, we often encounter examples of unfairness and injustice where, through no fault of their own, people seem to be punished for finding themselves in need, and where rules and regulations actively harm rather than help the average citizen who's simply seeking what they are entitled to. This is a key part of the role of an elected member, to help people navigate their way through the system, but since being elected I've been shocked at the inbuilt unfairness and costs of claiming. Take, for example, the Department of Work and Pensions. Although the initial inquiry to the DWP is free, follow-up inquiries about a claim, a query about benefit sanctions, or even reporting that a benefit has not been paid in time, all come with call charges. Constituents have told me that these calls can be very expensive, as much as £9 or £16 a time, and long waiting times to speak to an advisor bump up the costs even further. Other examples of services that charge for access are the Child Maintenance Helpline and the Home Office for inquiries about spousal visas, £1.37 a minute over and above network charges. There can be no justification for the Home Office imposing charges on anyone for a genuine inquiry service. The need to deal with telephone inquiries must be treated as a valid overhead cost, which is covered by the fees levied for the application process itself. Telephone network charges themselves vary, and again can be seen to discriminate against the very least well-off. All providers include O3 numbers in their inclusive call packages, but these are often presented as if these are only available to those who are well off. This even applies to the pay-as-you-go arrangements that are more likely to be used by low-income households who may be unaware of the bundles that are available to enable calls to be made at no more than 7p per minute, rather than the range of 10p a minute to 55p a minute, as suggested on the government website as updated on the 7th of February. I would like to thank Mr. Speaker David Hickson of the Fair Telecoms campaign for the information he has provided me with in preparing this bill. David tells me that the Fair Telecoms campaign fully supports the use of 0800 numbers and the consequent bonanza for telephone companies in cases where it's essential that nobody pays for a call. He is, however, concerned that the greater use of 0800 numbers would do nothing to help constituents who get ripped off when calling friends or their MP or even ordinary numbers. There is therefore a very strong case for all of us pushing the point that it is essential to ensure that everybody chooses the most appropriate telephone call plan for their needs. Those of us who are well off, smart consumers, would do this anyway, but there is need for greater assistance and guidance to be given to all. Mr. Speaker, last July the House of Commons Social Security Advisory Committee recommended that all telephone calls to DWP should be free via 0800 numbers. The response from the government is that this would cost £7 million, which isn't a lot in terms of the context of the overall budget. The rollout of universal credit threatens to extend call times and cost to claimants due to the very nature of the new benefit, which will require frequent contact from the claimant to the DWP to update them on circumstances. A ministerial written answer last year revealed that the average length of the call to the Universal Credit Helpline is 7 minutes 29 seconds, equivalent to £4.40 at one major phone operator's rates. Universal credit as a replacement for job seekers' allowance weekly equivalent is £73.34, so already claimants have less to live on than they are allocated simply for calling a helpline. The push over the edge into poverty should not be administered by the DWP and other government departments through charging for inquiry lines.
Absolutely.
When the safety net becomes a trap, it's time to ask what sort of government boosts telephone company profits on the backs of the poor. Far from working to create a society that is fair for all, the government has not responded positively so far to the campaign to remove telephone helpline charges that can cost up to 55 pence a minute. When I've queried the cost of calling, inevitably the ministerial response makes mention of the alternative of online access for inquiries and claims. That's fine if you're digitally literate, can afford broadband and live in an area with good connectivity. Not so great otherwise, and is a further inbuilt barrier to stop people accessing the support they are entitled to. Despite some funding being put into public access terminals and digital learning, if all the people who are seeking advice and claims were to switch from phoning to public internet access terminals, then libraries and community centres would be unable to cope with the demand. When researching this issue, Mr Speaker, I was particularly struck by a DWP spokesperson's response to the telephone tax campaign last year, which was that online access was widely available through the network of job centres. I'm just going to pause for a moment whilst we reflect on the proposed DWP estate closure programme. I believe that it shouldn't be too difficult for an audit to be conducted in conjunction with local authorities to identify the availability of free online access terminals available to your constituents or the lack thereof. In fact, I'm inclined to conduct one in my constituency of Glasgow South West and compare it to the claimant count, which I strongly suspect would reveal a mismatch. A callback is the other stock ministerial response to inquiries about phone charges for inquirers, but that's rather difficult to do when on hold and if not offered routinely and requires the caller to self-identify as vulnerable. I would suggest that's inbuilt humiliation within the system, something which is familiar to those of us who have watched I, Daniel Blake. I'm aware that ministers have promised a review of telephone charges, but would ask the government to act on the recommendations of the 2016 Social Security Advisory Committee report, telephony and DWP and HMRC. As part of the review, and introduce a more effective callback system for vulnerable customers and bring in an information system that advises customers of potential wait times. I also believe that this should be adopted across all government services as best practice. The need for reform is pressing with regard to benefit claims, but over-the-top charging for information through a lack of recognition of the limited access the least well-off have to a range of phone packages available and the lack of digital inclusion excludes and discriminates far too many of our citizens today. As Mr David Macaulay from the Trussell Trust put it, when incomes are extremely tight, we could see people being forced to choose between phoning to make a claim and buying essential food supplies. Mr Speaker, I'm aware that unless you've been in that position or have a caseload in a constituency like mine, it may be difficult for people to understand how disempowering or discriminatory the system can be, and that every penny spent on a phone call ramps up the stress and anxiety for those people who simply want to access information, support and the benefits they are entitled to. Thank you, Mr Speaker. I commend this bill to the House.
Order. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mary Black, Jonathan Edwards, Neil Gray, Dr Philippa Whitford, Drew Hendry, Ms Margaret Ritchie, Mr Alistair Carmichael, Ian Blackford, Mr Jim Cunningham, Graham Morris, Mark Durkin and myself, sir.
Fine, should be fine group of people.
Chris Stevens.
Government Services Telecommunication Charges Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 24th of March, sir.
Friday the 24th of March. Thank you. Order. The